Welcome back to Following Node on a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 198, and we are finishing Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. Paul, how are you?
Fantastic. Always like finishing these books. We've made a really quick pace, especially if you are listening along. For us to be finishing a book, it probably feels quicker than usual. But always excited to do this, and we'll be following this up afterward as well with our wrap-up, which is always my favorite episodes. So, looking forward to it.
Eliot?
Not to make you jealous, but I'm actually doing fantastic because my wife made a bunch of lemon bars for a church event today and had some extras. I just had one of those before coming down here to record, so I'm living life.
Sounds good. My wife made meatloaf, which I ate very quickly before coming onto the podcast, so I'm also in a good mood. Chapters 20 through the epilogue of Shadows of Self. And before we throw it to the intro, I'm going to tease at the end of the episode. I get to read from Rhythm of War.
Ooh.
And tie in something that you guys have previously read, but have certainly not keyed into. So with that, we'll roll intro and get a chapter summary from Eliot. All right, Eliot, Book 2, Era 2 of Mistborn, how does it end?
Okie doke. I got you. So this is from chapter 20 all the way through the epilogue. So buckle up. Where we left off, Wax had just entered into the Kandra homeland, and he's greeted there by Tensoon, which was a little bit of a reveal. A whole bunch of stuff happens down in the Kandra homeland. I'm not going to touch on it all, but I think there's a lot there worth unpacking. There's some distractions, I think, just planted there, like some false trails put there by Bleeder just to kind of lead them into there. They then get attacked by these weird creatures that are kind of hard to figure out what they are. They're like humans that have been turned into some kind of a hemalurgic beast. We don't really know. Pretty scary. Tensoon turns into his own version of a giant Koloss type beast to fight off all the whatever it is that's attacking them. They do escape. They climb out through these like tight crevices that we're told are the remnants of the pits of Sin, which I want to talk about for sure. They do get out. They then, pretty soon after that, discover that Bleeder is Governor, what's his name? Innate something?
Innate.
So the whole time, Bleeder has apparently been the governor right there amongst them. They chase Bleeder down, try to catch her multiple times. She keeps escaping. While Wax is kind of chasing Bleeder down, Milan takes that role. She takes on the body of the governor, becomes him, and goes to give the speech that the governor is trying to give to calm down the rioters, the mob that's trying to take over the city, basically. In that part of the story, Elendel arrests him, like in the middle of this speech, takes him down. While that's happening, Wax is having his showdown with Bleeder, and the big reveal is that Bleeder is and has always been Lessie this entire time. So Wax takes her down. Wax kills her. Well, Wax shoots her with a bullet that was made from his earring that he communicates with Harmony with, thus putting another spike in her, giving Harmony like instant control of her. Now we've taken down Bleeder. But as is kind of explored in the epilogue, that then kind of kicks off this massive dilemma for Wax. What did I just do? Did I just kill Leslie again? Is it my fault? Is it Harmony's fault? What just happened? And the book closes out with this tender moment with Wax crying on Steris' shoulder. A very, very melancholy end to the book. Not a hurrah, we've won moment that maybe you might expect a epic fantasy book to end with. It was much more of a, we won, or did we?
Before we get into bigger questions, Paul, do we have a patron?
You are so right, Mr. Trevor. We do. We have an ardent, specifically. And I'm always excited. And once again, my handwriting is really bad, but I feel like today is a little step up because I was looking for tape, and my wife conveniently had this very beautiful floral patterned tape. So we'll give a very special thank you to our ardent Roslyn. Hope I'm saying that right. Roslyn is what I'm going to go with. And, very beautiful flower, tape here. So we're very grateful to have Roslyn on the show. I also want to address something right quick. I'm sorry, this is off topic, but throughout the period of our podcast, I've always made a point through all of our Stormlight episodes to have a different cup or vessel for every episode, and I haven't been keeping that up for Mistborn. Believe it or not, I couldn't scrounge up 200 cups. I was also moving during these times and such, but I do have very good plans for once we revisit Stormlight. I will be continuing my trend of a new cup every episode of Stormlight material. So I just wanted to say that. I know nobody really cares, but I do, and so I'm just letting you all know that is a plan, and that will be a thing. So,
well, and coupled with that, back when we were doing Stormlight, I used to go through every episode, and for thumbnails of episodes, I would specifically pick a frame where you're drinking out of said different mug. I have since not been doing that since you haven't been doing changed mugs. But if you go back to it, then I certainly will.
I definitely will.
30 seconds.
Yes, but I wanted to say that because that's also, that's kind of originally that was like the patron gimmick we had was like, Surgeons and Up, you'll get your name on my cup of the week, and then also be in the little, because that was the snippet Trevor takes. But now I feel like that's less exciting. But definitely we are very thankful for ardent Roslyn. So I hope that's all right. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
We're always grateful to have.
Thank you.
More support. Yeah.
All right, Paul. I'm going to throw this right back at you. At the end of this episode, we have now had 4 direct Era 1 characters in our Era 2 books, I think. Sazed, Iron Eyes,
Tensoon, Milan.
Oh, Tensoon. Wait, was there 5? Hold on. Sazed, Milan, Iron Eyes, Tensoon. Is that it? 4. I'm right. Yeah, 4. Is that too many or too few? Are we leaning too heavily on Mistborn Era 1? Are we not calling back to it enough? What are your thoughts?
I actually think this is a pretty good sweet spot because if we hadn't read Era 1, if we picked straight up into Era 2, I don't think this would feel weird to us. I think, honestly, if I were to say one of them being the most out of place, which I don't think any of them are, it would maybe be Milan. Just as I feel like it's kind of assumed that you may know who Milan is. Whereas if you didn't know, then it might be a little not jarring, but it might not really do anything, I guess. But I think it's a sweet spot. I like the characters that we have in, and it doesn't feel overbearing. The emphasis is still very much on our new characters, and they're kind of running into our old characters that are still around. as they're going through their journeys. So I happen to like the amount in there. Yeah.
Elliot, too small, too big, or just right?
Feels right. Feels right. All the place name references to Era 1 is kind of like slightly comical, but also spot on. Think of street names in your city. A lot of them are named after people from 200 years ago or 100 years ago. And so, yeah, probably exactly what would be the case. I do like that none of our big main characters came back. I like that, Vin, Elend. Okay, fair.
There's come on. There's somebody conspicuously missing from these first two books that we know surely is somewhere.
There is, and I was about to use his name if it's who you were talking about. I was going to say I like the fact that this is going to soundbite's going to come back to haunt me. I like that fact that like Vin, Elend, Kelsier, their story is wrapped. That we had that story, we've moved on. We're not dragging that out. But yes, maybe Kelsier is a name we would have expected to see and notably haven't.
Yes, where is the survivor of Hathsin? Okay. Let's start with kind of the Elendel drama, and then we'll get into specifically Bleeder versus Wax after that. So they save the day. We arrest the governor, but turns out the governor was actually just Bleeder the whole time. So that's something that we find out in the Kandra homeland is Wax has the epiphany that Bleeder has been planning this for quite a long time. And so with that said, she put herself in the governor's position well before any of the books started happening. She was planning for all of this, and so she knew the passphrases from the start because she knew that they would start setting up that type of thing. So she was well in place, at least from right after the banquet scene, because there's a banquet scene that we covered in episode 2 of this book where there's Wax is talking directly to the governor, and then Wax chases Bleeder out the window. Do you guys remember this scene? And Wayne's like locked out of the party. And Wax chases Bleeder out the window, or at least who he assumes is Bleeder, and then turns out she was the governor the whole time. So where was she in that scene if she's been the governor the whole time?
I was a little confused by this, actually. Is it Bleeder's been the governor the whole time? Or in that scene where Wax realizes what's happening, or it comes to a head? Governor Bleeder's in the room, Wax is in the room, he like is pretending he doesn't know, but then they realize they both know, and then a little showdown. They talk about the scene we saw where Wax was trying to protect the governor from being assassinated by Bleeder. Bleeder gets past Wax, so Wax is like behind now. The way it unfolds is Bleeder gets to the governor. By the time Wax catches up, bodyguard is dead, governor is alive, Bleeder seems to have fled the scene.
Right.
Was it, for some reason, I kind of left that discussion feeling like that was the moment that Bleeder actually killed the governor and took the role right then? You're saying it was even before that.
It was long before that. So that scene is, they're both using their speed bubbles, right? Because
yes,
or Bleeder is tapping speed, and Wayne is dead, quote unquote, on the floor and speed bubbles, and that makes her panic because she's like expecting to rush in, take the place of the governor, and then pretend that Bleeder just fled the scene. So what ends up happening is she breaks open the door, has to kill her bodyguard to cover up, open the back door, and then pose as the governor. Right? Because Wax then asks her, you killed the bodyguard to cover for you, and she says, well, yeah, I had to because he was mine the whole time. He would have gone along with whatever I told him, but because you were right behind me, I had to, like, she didn't have time to clean up the blood that she was bleeding, so she had to have some reason that she was bleeding. So she killed her accomplice buddy and then opens the back door and says she ran out the back door. So okay. I don't actually know where exactly she was for the banquet scene. If she's innate there and she's got some other accomplice who's a steel pusher.
Well, the other part of this that our characters realize too late isn't it also the fact that Bleeder can transform way faster than they think she should?
Yes.
There's a few discussions. I think Milan is maybe the source of this info. She's like, oh yeah, only Tensoon can transform in the blink of an eye. Everyone else takes minutes or hours. So they kind of went with that assumption and assumed Bleeder would take longer than she does, because apparently she can do it really fast, because that scene you just described, in one room she's Bleeder, in the next room she's the governor.
No. In one room she is wearing the marksman's mask.
Oh, yeah.
And in the next scene she's not. So actually what she's doing is when she's wearing a face that she doesn't want them to know, she wears the marksman's mask. She does it in two different scenes. The scene right before she's the governor and the scene right before she's Lessie. So she reveals herself as both of those and covers her face with the marksman's mask. And Wax kind of just writes it off as she's just trying to confuse me or get in my head or whatever. But no, she's doing it very deliberately, because in this next scene that she's about to set up, she has to be this person and already dressed as them.
Got it. It's making sense now.
But Aradel knows none of this. And in front of the crowd that's about to turn into a mob, he pulls his revolver on the governor. I love this scene. It's so good. And arrests the governor, tells his cops to turn their back on the raging mob and join them. And he makes a speech and says, I'm with you. If you are going to burn the city down, I will fight you with everything I have. But as far as arresting noblemen and getting rid of corruption, I am 100% on your side. And that is how we save the city, is actually Constable Aradel, and actually by the end of this book, Governor Aradel, a title that he expressly does not want. But I really like Aradel and what he does in these scenes. What do you guys think?
I thought that was an important distinction in that scene, that Aradel doesn't have the information and makes that decision anyway. It's a dilemma that was set up earlier. Marasi played a big role in it. Here's a governor. He's corrupt. We have evidence to this, although maybe the whole thing was a setup by Bleeder anyway, but he didn't know that. And he's left with a big choice. Do I defend a system that's broken in the name of not anarchy, or do I do what maybe seems right and turn and help overthrow that system that is treating the populace unfairly? And he makes the latter decision. And I wonder if that's going to set up him to become a pretty major character later. That seems like I'm taking a controversial and very difficult to make choice. I'm taking a stance, and it does help at the end of the day.
I'll talk about this more next week when we do our wrap up, but Aradel is my favorite character from specifically this book, but maybe from Oliveira too. All right. Tensoon and Wax fight zombie dog people. What's going on in chapter 20? Actually, it's 21.
So I was trying to figure out what these were. In my head, I just assumed that these were, I guess, Koloss. Like, I feel like for lack of certainty, I was like, okay, yeah, this is probably a Koloss fight or something, or some kind of other Kandra that were morphed into something. Yeah, I wasn't sure, so I'm glad to know that I see in our outline it says hemalurgy, werewolf / Koloss / mutations. So I'm glad to know that I was the only one with not a super clear picture, I guess, fuzzy imagery of what these were exactly. I will say I think maybe the way I'd have to go back and hear how it actually was phrased. But whenever Tensoon kind of bulks up and transforms, at first I thought what he was transforming into like the hound that we see him as, like with Vin,
The
in
horse
Arrow
pig?
1.
Oh no, the wolf.
No, I'm talking about the wolf hound,
Okay,
like
yeah.
in Arrow 1. But I think maybe I was imagining that. Maybe that didn't actually happen.
I think he currently is the wolf. Like that's how Wax is introduced to
That's
him,
right. Yeah.
and then he's just tapping strength. I think is what's happening. Like, do you remember when Seiza does that to defend the gates in
Yes.
the second book? And he just kind of bulks up a little bit. I think it's just wolf dog bulked up is what is going on. So to answer your guys' question, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure these are Bleeder's failed attempts to make Koloss. I think this is like I watched the Lord Ruler make Koloss, and so now I'm going to try it, and this is what showed up. So you know how it was stated at like the end of the Final Empire, the Hero of Ages, that hemalurgy is like a very precise like science and art, and like if you don't get it just right, your spikes won't work, or they'll do like crazy things to Inquisitors and Koloss and stuff. I think that's what's happening here, but where she's attempting to make like Koloss fighting zombie people, and she ended up making like wolves instead. So because they were definitely howling and barking and screeching. So yeah.
I think it's mentioned in the section, it's probably 10 soon, that these creatures were specifically made to fight Wax. They're meant to be hard for a twinborn. Was that the term?
Yeah, twinborn.
For someone of the unique skills of a twinborn, difficult for them to take down. They definitely seem more Koloss than Kandra. Very violent. Kandra aren't super violent typically, or at least they haven't been in the past.
Yeah, historically they've been deliberately not
Right.
aggressive. Like they've been told by preservation not to injure anybody. So
And maybe based on Bleeder, that's now a bad assumption in Era 2, but definitely seems very Kolossy. But they also had this like creepy human element to them.
yeah,
They were meant to be unsettling. Let's go with that word. To
disturbing.
Wax. Sure. I actually the comparison that jumped to my brain was, I'm sure you guys have seen the movies, maybe you've read the books too, the Hunger Games in the first book, and I think continued on throughout the stories as well. Yeah, the mutts, the Capitol makes these creatures like specifically with the faces of human competitors to creep out and create a psychological challenge, not just a physical challenge for the contestants.
Good parallel. I just watched those 4 movies with my wife like 2 weeks ago. I had something to say about Tensoon. I don't remember what it was.
There's another bit of this segment to fill the space here while you think. Tensoon says something very interesting. And I don't know if there's a deeper meaning in this or if it's just very poignant in the moment. Tensoon talks with Wax a little bit. I forget the exact details, but he doesn't like having to fight. Back to that whole Kandra used to be peaceful. Tensoon does not like the fact that he has to Hulk out as this big dog beast thing to fight them. And he says something to Wax along the lines of, he's talking about harmony here. You are his ruin. I am his preservation. Kind of pointing to this fact of, no, Wax, you're supposed to be the one doing the violence because that's your part of being Harmony's servant. I'm supposed to be the protector one. I'm supposed to be preservation, that side of Harmony's service.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I'll be bringing that up later.
Ooh.
The thing that I was trying to think of, Eliot, you said that Palm or Bleeder was like a deviation that maybe Conjure are going to be more aggressive. I would even say Milan would add to that. Like, Milan doesn't seem to bat an eye on killing thugs and protecting Wax and Wayne. She even says, "Don't tell Tensoon because he cares about this, but I certainly don't." Like, so are Kandra still bound by the contract to not harm anybody? Does not seem like it.
That is interesting because the most perspective that we've had of Kandra up to this point was via Tensoon in the first series. So maybe we have to rethink that because it seems like the others do not care because we knew that was restricted. That was part of the contract, right? That couldn't harm anybody. So interesting.
Well, it also seems like in the previous era, you had actors who were acting for ruin and actors who were acting for preservation. Like there were forces and there were categories. You could kind of put everyone in one of those categories. Are they trying to destroy or are they trying to not destroy and protect? Now that both of those are one in harmony, it now almost seems like we've got where you would have expected a balance. We almost have an unbalance. It's almost like things that you would think would be protecting are now destroying, and where maybe you actually need some destroying, there's a protective force there. It's almost like things have gotten jumbled somehow.
Almost like that, yes. All right, Eliot, you said you want to talk about the pits of Hath Sin.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't super wowed by the pits, but
you weren't?
No, I don't care. It's like Kelsier reference. I don't care about Kelsier.
Wow. Okay.
I did think this was cool, especially since, to our knowledge, I don't remember exactly where we left off on this, but I think the understanding is that this is a perpendicularity, right? Or
that is true.
Allegedly is a perpendicularity or something.
So, to back up a little bit, the chapter previous, Wax walks directly past a perpendicularity that we've confirmed, right? Because he walks past Cretic Shaw that's underground, and he's like, "Oh, Rusts, the Well of Ascension itself would be right in there. I'll come back and visit that later." And then the next chapter, he's climbing up the pits of Hath Sin, which, in Secret History, Hoyd that tells Kelsier, "You destroyed one of these perpendicularities. This is the only working one," talking about the Well of Ascension. So yes, the pits is also a perpendicularity, so you would assume that both of these are right next to each other based on how fast-paced this chapter is. But put a little pin in that. We're actually going in back. The Secret History is not published yet. So if you want to get technical, we don't actually know that yet because Secret History is published after Bands of Mourning, directly, like immediately after Bands of Mourning. So as far as like confirmed perpendicularities, yes, but if you were reading this in chronological order, you wouldn't know that yet.
Okay. Either way, my thoughts with this, I kind of tuned in a little bit whenever I realized it was the Pits of Hath Sin. I thought it was neat. It wasn't like a crazy, oh my gosh, we're at the pits of Hathsin. Like I wasn't blown away by it. But I thought it was really neat.
Far, yes.
I thought it was neat, and I was kind of just keying in for any other details we might get, I guess, from this. But,
well, I was also keyed in, but then there's nothing. Like the only thing that happens is Wax is like, "Oh, once upon a time there was probably ATM right here." Moving on. That's it.
So wait, isn't there? I could be wrong. I think the only thing I remember, which I only read this once, so maybe I need to go reread it. But don't they have some mention that maybe there is ATM here? I feel like there was a mention that it is sort of functional again. It's not like rough and gonna tear you to shreds, but in my head, this was our understanding was the pits of Hathsin were destroyed, but not like permanently destroyed. Like it will regenerate in a couple, in hundreds of years or whatever. So I feel like I saw something that or heard something that indicated maybe it was kind of coming back, or maybe I'm totally wrong. I could have made that up.
I don't remember a direct reference to it. However, in the Final Empire, Kelsier deliberately gives a date on when ATM would return. Any memory on when? Sazed and Kelsier tell the crew this. Yes, Tuesday on... the
on
date
Tuesday.
he gives is 300 years.
Okay.
ATM is gone for 300 years. And if you read the broadsheets in this book, the current year is 328. That is the date of the wine that Alan Maester Jack is drinking in the broadsheet. So you might actually be onto something, Paul. Is the ATM coming back right about now? All right, Elliot, you look like you're itching to say something.
I am, because y'all are being way too literal with this. You're thinking you've missed a bit of lore. That's not what I keyed into at all. My mind was blown by this scene, and I'll explain why. It's purely the symbolism of what's happening here. Think about... Don't shake your head at me. Think about this. Let me paint the scene. Let me paint the scene for you here. Okay, Arrow 1, Kelsier. One of his defining moments is the pits of Hathsin. The fact that the pits break him down to such a low level that he has to climb back up, literally and figuratively, climb back up and remake himself into who he is, which then leads him to go off and do the things he does to inspire others, Vin, on and on and on. Where are we at with Wax at the end of this book? Think about it. His world is shattered. All his assumptions are being questioned, being tested. He's had this faith in Harmony this whole time. He's talked directly to Harmony, thinks he's a buddy, a friend, and at the end of this is like, what have I done? Can I even trust you? Are you even who you think you are? And here we get a scene of Wax literally climbing out of the pits of Hathsin. Could the symbolism be any more specific and direct than that? I envision this scene with epic, sad orchestral score behind it as Wax slowly clambers out through these cracks as these werewolf hound things are snapping out from behind. We flash back to Kelsier doing the same thing, crawling out of the pits. The lightning is flashing above, making it dramatic. Kelsier emerges and has a newfound sense of purpose. Wax emerges, and his world is broken by the end of all this. How can you not feel something in this scene?
I'm glad you painted the picture. Trevor's being really mean about this. I liked it. I like the symbolism. And I think it is. I think it's actually an excellent parallel that you bring up that I did not 100% think of. I absolutely see the direct similarity between Kelsier's Pits of Hathsin experience and this, like, being a symbolic, like, similar thing. This happens. So timeline. This happens, and then he goes and finds Bleeder, and all the stuff happens, right?
Correct.
I feel like if those, I mean, maybe this is me once again being too literal, but if it was a little more chronological there, I feel like this would have hit a lot harder for me. But if this was afterward and him crawling out, then maybe so. But like I felt like we hadn't even met the problem yet. I mean, they had met problems for sure. There was definitely problems at hand, but it wasn't the major problem, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. The lessee dilemma.
You guys are missing a key.
So it didn't hit me.
You guys are missing a key piece to this. The reason why the parallel is deliberate, but it's deliberate on Bleeder's part. Bleeder is trying to tear Wax apart and get him to have a new perspective coming out so that she can face him, right? And so this was all orchestrated by Bleeder so that he can turn his back on God, as Kelsier does against the Lord Ruler, and fight him. So the fact that he's climbing out of the Pits of Hathsin he's being manipulated, actively manipulated in this scene to think of himself as the survivor of Hathsin and then go fight God. So
But it works. And by the end of this, we have a broken Wax, and now we're left with this. We've finished the book, and we're stuck with this question of: will he climb out, or will he sink back down?
I have one question for specifically Trevor.
Uh-huh.
If this was the case, which is kind of neat. I didn't think about this. I didn't think of that being orchestrated by Bleeder. If that's the case, did you really just come in and be like, yeah, no, Pits of Hathsin, like, not my thing, period. And then when we elaborate on it, you're like, no, guys, you're looking at this all wrong and bringing in this, like, insight. Were we going to miss that information? Because I feel like that's super important.
I would not have brought it up, but
wow.
Because Eliot is painting this picture, you have to realize who's holding the brush. Bleeder is orchestrating all of this. That's what Wax just said in the Kandra homeland. She's manipulating all of this, and then he's like, oh, this is really cool. I'm climbing out of the Pits of Hathsin. Why are you climbing out of the Pits of Hathsin? Because you were herded there by zombie werewolves from Crazy Lady. Right?
I mean, I suppose so, but I guess I didn't pick that up, so my apologies.
You're absolutely right, but I think that doesn't really diminish the symbolism for me. It's a fabricated experience. Mm-hmm. Bleeder has crafted all of this to manipulate Wax. Bleeder's very good at that, apparently. The whole manipulation, psychological warfare thing. But for me, we still leave Wax broken at the end of this. The last line of the book is Wax bawling his eyes out on Sterish's shoulder. Wax, the hero, the like stoic, isn't fazed by anything hero, is crying on the shoulder of his betrothed.
Yeah.
For me, it's still it lands. It sinks in.
But like Paul said, he's supposed to come out of the pits after that. He's supposed to break and then ascend.
For me, it's the reference. The reference is there to show me you're right. In the story we're at now, Wax is at the bottom of the pits of Hathsin right now. Now we gotta figure out what does he do next? Where are we going to pick up in the next book? What is going to be the opening scene? Although apparently the prologue is going to be a flashback to Lessie, because that's apparently what they do. Chapter 1. Where's Chapter 1 going to pick up with Wax?
I'm going to throw a log on the fire of this, actually. What we've been thinking, that this whole thing with the Pits of Halcyon. So, Eliot's right with the symbolism, but the thing missing for Wax, if we're going to attach this significance of the Pits of Halcyon and this kind of overcoming adversity, if you will, like all the things tied into this, turning back from all the stuff that's gone in the past, that's great, and that is symbolic, but the reason I'm wanting that afterward is because at that point, Wax hadn't really faced the major moment.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm thinking about right now, I thought about this while y'all were talking, is that this is now, like you said, he's now at the bottom of the pits, if you will. Like he is now having what's making it real and strong and personal for him, right? Kelsier had these scars, Lord of Scars. Like he had scars, he had the kind of reminder. There was like the deliberate experience and trial of the pits themselves. And Wax isn't going through the exact same thing that Kelsier did. But he came up out of the Pits of Halcyon and insert symbolism. But now he's facing his equivalent, if you will, like his lowest point, his most difficult moment afterward in a totally different sense. It's more of the like headcanon emotional shock value, unable to believe what's happening, rather than like the Kelsier's was more, I guess, deliberate, torturous prison sentence, and things like that. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that we could talk about later. But like you said, the first chapters in the next book is going to be influential because we're ending where Wax is kind of at that point, at that like depth, the bottom,
Right.
But yeah, it really, this whole moment is going to hinge on the next book, I think. Like, I think a lot of my, whether I really like the symbolism and whether this all works out well for me is going to be very dependent on where it goes.
I think another big question here is, I'm very curious if this tie back, these parallels back to Era 1 are a bleeder thing or an Era 2 thing. Can we use this to try and maybe predict where we're going with this? If we're getting all these Wax Kelsier comparisons, is the next step? I mean, Kelsier goes on to go on this crusade to overthrow God, the Lord Ruler, in his existence, in his example. Is Wax now about to step into a pull together the people to overthrow God? Is that where this plot is going? Or is maybe what you're trying to impress on us, Trevor, is this all a bleeder manipulation thing? And assuming bleeder / Lessie is not a recurring character going forward, does that end with this book? Is that a Shadows of Self thing, or is it an Era 2 thing?
Well, and several times in this book, I think it's each one is from the perspective of Marcy, where Marcy kind of stops and thinks to herself, "Oh, this reminds me of something," or where have I read that before? It comes up with the priest guy getting spiked through the eyes, on like nailed to the wall in last episode, and she's like, "Oh, this reminds me of something from the Historica or whatever." Moving on, and then in this episode, the riot and like Elendel like glowing with firelight. She's like, "Oh, this must have been what it was like on that night in Luthadel when they overthrew the Lord Ruler." Moving on, so I'm arguing it's a Bleeder thing. Bleeder did all of this to try to relive that night of overthrowing the Lord Ruler because she saw it happen. She was there and wants to overthrow God. So here's the recipe. Here's how you do it.
Interesting. I think my my issue, not issue with the story, like what I feel like I read this incorrectly. I feel like I was not giving, if that's the case, I feel like I have not been giving Bleeder enough credit. I haven't been thinking of Bleeder as this master orchestrator setting all this up, and more as just a more honestly simple villain. That's how I've been thinking about it. I know that our Kandra are powerful and, pretty immortal, but I guess I haven't thought of them as this like mastermind, orchestrating everything like this. Like, it feels a bit far-fetched to me even still.
So that question, I think, hinges on one thing. Throughout this whole book, all of our heroes say she's crazy, right? She's going insane. She's crazy. In that last scene, does she seem crazy to you? It's fine if it's yes or no. Which one, if you were to pick one?
I mean, I would say yes, but I think I went into it also looking specifically for crazy,
Okay.
In the last scene, we'll talk about it more, but I was trying... It took me a while to really confidently say whether this was yes or no. Is this Lessie?
Right.
or
it's supposed to... It's the last page of the last chapter with the epilogue excluding. It's the last page where Wax finally accepts, no, this is Lessie. This Lessie was a Kandra way back then. I married and was married to for 10 years a Kandra without knowing it. That's the last page of the book before the epilogue, which actually there's a lot in the epilogue. But I would argue she's not crazy. She's just being moved by something else, which we can talk about her spike in a second here. But I want to read some quotes for you guys to set up this final scene that we've been talking about. So the last page of the book, the last page of the last chapter, Wax finally does accept that this is Lessie. Lessie claims that Harmony was telling her to manipulate Wax to send him back to Elendel because Harmony needed Wax back in Elendel to deal with the Vanishers from last book. Right? Lessie refuses to do so. So Harmony tells Bloody Tan to go on this thing. Do you remember what Bloody Tan says? I've met with God. I've met with Iron Eyes. Someone else moves us. Right? Harmony meets with Bloody Tan to set up that Lessie is going to die so that Wax returns to Elendel to deal with the Vanishers. Harmony sets up all of that. Harmony sets up Lessie dying so that Wax will return to Elendel. So in this last page of this book, Lessie, or Bleeder, or Palm, or whatever name you would like to use, tells Wax, ask Harmony. Ask him why he sent a Kandra to watch over you all those years ago. Ask him if he knew I would come to love you. He moved us even then. I refused. I wouldn't manipulate you into returning to Elendel. You loved it out there. I wouldn't bring you back to become his pawn.
Back to your question, super quick, that you asked a second ago of, is Bleeder insane, crazy? I think I would answer yes, but in a specific sense of that word. More on the side of psychopath versus insanity. Bleeder seems to have the logic. This doesn't come across as a insane person or crazy person to me. But working on some assumptions, which I very much am now wondering if they should be the correct assumptions, mainly that Harmony's a good guy, that this is a person more that's like they're functioning, they have the right logic, rationality, but they're missing a key puzzle piece and are therefore crazy. They've gotten one thing wrong. They're missing a little bit, which is actually going to tie into a quote I'm going to read next episode. So it's more of like she's passionate, but she's missed it.
For the record, I do think that Sazed is still good, for what it's worth.
I do too, and I was thinking one thing about this. I feel like it's going to be explicitly answered if that's the case. It's been ambiguous, and I feel like that's what it's setting up. Is Harmony actually good, or is Harmony a villain here in this story? I think this is going to be answered in the future, and I think the answer kind of has to be yes, just for Cosmere implications. Not necessarily that, Sazed was a good guy, so he's gonna do good holding a shard. But if he can't, then I feel like there has to be another solution of like maybe splitting the shards back up. But we've seen how that goes. It feels like if we are now like Harmony is the bad guy, we have to overthrow Harmony at this stage, then it feels like there's no solution in the future for anything Cosmere, like cosmic scale like that. So I think we're going to get confirmation that Harmony is good and we just didn't understand, or there's going to be some clarification or something like that.
So I used my words very specific. I think Sazed is still good. I think by definition, Harmony is neutral. Exactly net zero. Neutral. And I think that Sazed is trying to pull Harmony positive. I would argue that he is fighting against his shard at the moment. And I'll read something to back it up. This is in defense of Harmony. This is Milan talking to Marisi. Marisi starts. You realize what all of this has done to Waxillium, right? He'll weather it, Milan said. He shouldn't have to. And what would you have Harmony do, woman? Give us all the answers? Lead us by the noses like Pa'alm swore that he did? Turn us all into pieces on a board for his amusement? Marisi stepped back. Or maybe you want it the other way. Leave us completely alone, not intervene at all? No. Can you imagine what it must be like, knowing that any action you take is going to help some, but hurt others? Save a man's life, let him spread a disease that kills a child later in his life. Harmony does the best he can, the best possible, by the very definition. Yes, he hurt Wax. He hurt him badly. But he put the pain where he knew it could be borne. Marisi blushed, then, annoyed with herself, dug in her purse and brought out the strange spike. And this? It's not a metal we know. That's what Tensoon said. But Harmony, it's not a metal Harmony knows. Then it's not his? It's not from his form, like the old stories of Atium and Laracium? No. It's from somewhere else. She used these strange spikes to steal attributes instead of the ones we're familiar with. I can stop it there. So I think if the relationship between Sazed and Harmony, I think if Harmony were to win, then he would leave them completely alone, as Milan says there. Do you want him to leave us completely alone, or do you want him to try, like he's trying? What do you guys think?
Just to cap off what the point I was talking about earlier, I want to say that I agree with what you were saying. I do think Sazed is good. We know with shards, there's so much like strict rules with what they can and will and are able to do that I think you're right. I think he's kind of trying to pull it good. but maybe is not always able to do so. And I really like the quote that you had. I think that summed it up really well about kind of like the best interest, the best option, but that doesn't mean the best option is only sunshine and daisies, you know?
Right.
I feel like that still leaves a big question, which I'm sure is where we're going with this, because it's where Wax is left at the end of this book, which is, okay, the god you follow, the god that exists on your world, is neutral. Should you serve and further the cause of a god that's neutral, not necessarily good? Or where do you fit as a person in that equation? What should Wax do next?
Or even if it's not neutral, what if you got the negative side of the equation? So we would all agree that just defeating the Vanishers, kidnapping women, making them bear children for allomancy purposes 30 years down the line, we would all agree that's not good. But then you have Wax, who has gotten the negative part of this equation to have his wife die so that he returns to Elendel and deals with the Vanishers. Deals with the Vanishers? Good. It seems like Wax got the short end of the stick, though. So what should Wax do specifically? It's a really good question.
Exactly.
This definitely plays into the whole somebody else moves us. You know, this seems very direct. It obviously is that a connection with that. Yeah, I think this is touching on a real, difficult life topic. I feel like you could get into. So that's interesting. I think this, most of all, is what I'm very grateful for this podcast, because I think I've been reading this a little too linearly in the story, and now I'm like, oh man, okay, I need to put my thinking cap on whenever I'm reading these.
Okay, I'm going to read a quote, and it's going to feed into another quote from Rhythm of War. So buckle up. This quote is Wax speaking. Wax says, and he's talking to Bleeder, "You're wrong about me." "How am I wrong?" Bleeder asked. "I'm not Harmony's hands," Wax whispered. "I'm his sword." Then he fired. All right. A little bit of setup on this Rhythm of War quote. This is Harmony's letter to Hoid in the epigraphs. Hoid has asked all the shards he knows for help against Odium. Back in The Way of Kings, I think it's the letter. Harmony writes 2 letters back to Hoid, and this is the second one. We'll go through both at some point on the podcast, but here's an excerpt from the second one. This is Harmony speaking to Hoid. The deaths... Oh, and one other thing. This is written pre-Mistborn Era 2. Like, I think like within 10 years of Alloy of Law. Like, before that. Okay? The deaths of both Devotion and Dominion trouble me greatly, as I had not realized this immense power we had was something that could be broken in such a way. On my world, the power always gathered and sought a new vessel. That said, the most worrying thing I have discovered in this was the wound upon the spiritual realm where ambition, mercy, and odium clashed. And ambition was destroyed. The effects on that planet Threnody have been disturbing. Other shards I cannot identify and are hidden to me. I fear that their influence encroaches upon my world, yet I am locked into a strange inability because of the opposed powers I hold. I have begun searching for a pathway out of this conundrum by seeking the ideal person to act on my behalf. Someone who embodies both preservation and ruin. A sword, you might say, who can both protect and kill. But this does not get to the core of your letter. I have encouraged those who would speak to me to heed your warnings, but all seem content to ignore Odium for the time being. In their opinion, he is not a threat as long as he remains confined to the Risharan system. I do not share their attitude. If you can, as you supposed, maintain Odium's prison for now, it would give us necessary time to plan. This is a threat beyond the capacity of one shard to face. Unfortunately, as proven by my own situation, the combination of shards is not always a path to greater power. We must assume that Odium has realized this and is seeking one singular terrible goal, the destruction and somehow splintering or otherwise making impotent of all shards other than him. To combine powers would change and distort who Odium is, so instead of absorbing others, he destroys them. Since we are all essentially infinite, he needs no more power. Destroying and splintering the other shards would leave Odium as the sole god, unchanged and uncorrupted by other influences. So all that to say, Wax is in rhythm of war, and you didn't know it.
I did not know it, because there's the quote directly that he says he's Harmony's sword, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the direct quote? Yeah. I remember reading this in Rhythm of War and coming to the conclusion that Nightblood was sent, and Nightblood is the embodiment of two shards. Not one shard, but two shard, when that was still kind of a mystery to us.
You both were laughed at quite hard before jumping to the Nightblood conclusion.
And considering I had no other applicable guess, it's fine. But yes, I understand the laughter, and it is really amusing.
But here's one problem, though. At the end of this book, Wax and Harmony are not on good terms. Wax feels betrayed, rightfully so, by Harmony. So now what?
I feel like the finger is firmly pointing back at Harmony come the end of this book. That is now kind of the question in front of us. Our characters that we've been following, they've developed quite a bit. They've either solved problems in front of them or discovered new ones or made big steps. But we're kind of left with this question of, but hang on a second, what about Harmony? And so either we need to see more of Harmony and Wax needs to be able to get back on the same page, or this goes down the road that we kind of alluded to earlier of, is Harmony something we need to dethrone or remove or separate the shards? Or what is Harmony a force to be better understood or a force to be acted against?
So you were saying, Trevor, what do we do? They're on bad terms right now. Well, that's what these next two books are going to be about. They're going to, it's going to take a little bit of time, but they're going to become friends again one day, I believe. I mean, kind of the joking manner aside, I do think that is a major part of what we will see is some form of, I don't know. I'm not going to say a form of reconciliation, but at least some answers, maybe for Wax or some kind of adjustment. There's still plenty of time to handle that. So
there's also another entity hovering in the vicinity of our story here that has been named but not described in any way, and that name is Trell.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say it and not described in any way. I feel like Miles did actually give us a few hints, perhaps. But we have this name of Trell, and the letter you read, Trevor, just now from Harmony actually had an interesting bit in there too, where Sazed said something like,
Other shards I cannot identify and are hidden to me. I fear that their influence encroaches upon my world, yet I am locked into a strange inability because of the opposed powers I hold.
And I feel like we've gotten to the point where we understand the inability, perhaps, of I'm holding two very opposite shards. That kind of brings me to a standstill. My hands are tied, I think is the term that he uses before. But The influence of other shards. Could that perhaps be a reference to this Trell character?
So, in that Marasi Milan conversation, they end it with, "This spike isn't of something that Harmony knows; it's of something that is not of Harmony." And Marasi goes, "What? Well, what can hide from a god?" And Milan says, "Another god." And then Milan says, "Congratulations, you've now found the thing that terrifies us, terrifies Harmony." So, place your bets, gentlemen. What are the shards coming in?
That is really interesting because I think you're definitely onto something, because my question has been still so coming into this book, throughout this book, I'm like, okay, Bleeder is the bad guy of this book. The previous book, right, it was Miles and stuff, but it still feels like we're in the zoomed in local villains, you know. I'm waiting for like the big evil villain, you know, to come in. And that's something that I thought wasn't possible until now, potentially. So it would be very interesting. So I'm definitely going to be keying into that all of going forward.
I feel like this is probably me still being naive, even though I've now read a fair amount of the Cosmere. I feel like a lot of our shards are accounted for at this point. They're either dead, or we know where they are and roughly what they're doing. So to have a whole nother shard enter the picture here seems unlikely. I'm kind of expecting Trell to be maybe another Hoid type character, like a mover and shaker at the Cosmere level, but not a shard or vessel.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go through them really quickly to see what's been shattered, what's accounted for, etc., etc. We have Dominion and Devotion, who are on Elantris. They've died a long time ago. Preservation and Ruin, both held by Harmony. We have Odium, Cultivation, and Honor. They're in their three-way fight on Roshar. We have Endowment, who is never named except for in letters in Stormlight Archive. Endowment is on Nalthis, Warbreaker. Okay. We have Autonomy.
I thought the Nalthis one is splintered, right? Do we know that?
No, Nalthis is held by a vessel.
Oh, okay. I'm wrong.
We have Autonomy, who you guys haven't met yet, is the shard on Taldane for White Sand.
Okay.
We have Ambition, who is dead,
Threnody.
on Threnody. Ambition was splintered by Mercy and Odium, or by Odium, and Mercy was there.
Yeah, there was a tussle between the three of them.
Whose side was Mercy on? That's a great question. And then we have Invention, Mercy, Valor, and Whimsy. Okay? Those four are mentioned by name later in that letter by Harmony. Harmony, in that letter back to Hoid, says, I reached out to these other shards to varying levels of success. Stuff like that. And then the 15th one, you guys...
Virtuosity?
Yes, you guys learned in Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, Virtuosity, the art one, leaves a 16th one that we don't know. So this is either somebody who's on this list, somebody who's not a shard, or the 16th shard.
My vote, for the record, not a shard.
Okay.
But maybe an actor of one of those shards. Like Sazed's getting at, maybe it's a shard who is off doing other things, but maybe is influencing Scadrial with this powerful but not a shard being.
I agree. I feel like there can't be another shard thrown in. I would actually prefer if there's another shard thrown in here. But if so, then I would have way too many unanswered questions and not really sure I will say for the record, if there is another shard on here, I think they're somehow tied to... Because what? We have Allomancy, Hemalurgy, and Feruchemy, which I always thought was a bit odd that it seemed like there were 3 like magic things, but only 2 shards. That always felt a bit odd to me. So and it's always like what Allomancy was a preservation. What not Ferric.
Hemalurgy.
Hemalurgy in my head is a ruin, right? And then the other one was kind of both. I think was the understanding. I could be wrong. I think it was kind of that that Feruchemy was kind of both shards. That could be a misunderstanding. I could believe if that was the case, and this other one, their thing is Feruchemy. But we will see. It could be. If I'm going to make a prediction as to which one, I think it would be what Autonomy is one we haven't seen, right?
The one
and
on
that
Haldane?
could explain why there's like these miswraiths and stuff that just kind of are there, that I don't have too much ground to stand on. But anyways, for the record, final answer, I don't think there's another shard, but if they do, then I think their thing is secretly been Feruchemy all along.
Okay.
Their thing, their magic. Okay.
I'm going to leave predictions for next episode. Do we have anything for wrapping up this episode, gentlemen?
Yes, I do. I want to know, this has been the number one thing I've wanted to talk with y'all about this night. Specifically Eliot, but also Trevor, I want to hear, this isn't like a prediction thing or anything like that. So the reveal at the end of this book is Lessie. Is Wax is confronted with Lessie, and at first he's it's very angry. Like the reader felt angry and frustrated because we're like, Bleeder is impersonating or putting on the face of Lessie. He thinks that that Bleeder has dug up Lessie's body,
right,
to impersonate Lessie, and is furious, right? And then this unfolds, and so we're led to believe she's impersonating Lessie, and then you're kind of like, she really is playing into this whole Lessie thing a lot. It's not just like a fear or cheap tactic. And then it's like, okay, she's saying she's actually Lessie. Could she actually be Lessie? And then you're like, no, she couldn't. They were married for 10 years. Like, no way. And then you find out it actually is. And it was this whole back and forth thing. And this big reveal is that Lessie was Bleeder. Lessie was an agent of Harmonia Kandra this entire time. How did you feel about this as the story element, as kind of our Sanderlanche, if you will, the end of our book? I'm just curious to know your general thoughts about this story-wise. Did you like this? Was this a big reveal? Was this... I thought it was kind of fun, humorously timed, because in the previous episode, we were like, I'm kind of over the Lessie talk, So I thought this was funny, and that's why I wanted to ask Eliot about it. But I also want to know, Trevor, what you think about this aspect of the story.
Can I answer this first? Okay. So I remember listening to this the first time, and I was still under the assumption that this was not Lessie by the end of the book. I missed the proof when I read it. So this did not hit at all. I was like, cool. They got Bleeder. Wax thinks that it was Lessie. It wasn't actually. The end. He'll get over it. Once he figures out it wasn't actually Lessie, great. And then I read it a second time, and I was like, okay, hold up. There are way more moral implications, as Bleeder brings up in the last chapter. I was there the whole time, and that matters. Our relationship was real. I was there. I am Lessie. I was there the whole time. I wanted to be human for you. I loved you, is what she says. And so when that does hit for you, I think this might be my favorite Era 2 book. I've only read The Lost Metal once, so I don't remember. But when the punch hit me hard the second time. The first time, I was not impressed by this book. I thought we were running around in circles for no reason. We win at the end of the day, great. But then when you do dig into the details, I really like that reveal. I think it is really good. The questions that we've been discussing in this episode and that this situation demands, I think is brilliant.
I think for me, it is a big reveal. I would not have guessed it. It did surprise me. I think it hits me. I think my word for this book is psychological. It hits me psychologically in that it's something I wasn't ready for. It does not hit me emotionally. I don't really feel much sadness or grief in this moment because, as we talked about, it was probably last episode, that I never felt an emotional connection to Leslie to begin with. I've never seen any tender moments with her. I don't share Wax's memories of her. Is it emotional for Wax? Absolutely. Is all that believable? Is the emotional damage that he's going to now have painful and real? Definitely. Am I feeling that? Not really. There's way more other characters in the Cosmere where I have felt some of the emotional trauma that some of the characters might be feeling. This is not one of those moments. So it doesn't hit me super hard, but it does work as a reveal, I think, in this book.
I do agree. I agree that it works as a reveal, but I think I echo a lot of your feelings towards it, Eliot. In that it felt like we're redoing the same big point, the same big factor that we saw at the very start of Era 2. And I think, kind of adding to that, I feel like this is almost more heartbreaking of a scene for Leslie, who we, especially at this point, knowing that Leslie has been our villain, we really don't hold much sympathy for. Like I gained sympathy for Bleeder, for Leslie at the end. I definitely did, because it was a weird, like you said, a weird psychological dilemma, I guess you could say. And very unfortunate, but yeah, but it felt like trying to hammer in the nail that's already been hammered in, you know? It felt like it was kind of going back to it. And like Trevor said on his first read through, not even catching it. I did get it by the end. I went back and forth about 4 or 5 times, you know, while reading this. But yeah, it felt a bit off. So I guess it wasn't my favorite, but I'm curious to know what other people think as well. From talking about all the things that we've talked about in this episode, it has really given me a much greater appreciation for Wax and for a lot of the things going on and a lot of the problems at hand, which has been great. But I will say that this didn't necessarily pay out for me. I don't know how you could do this story while providing more insight or more perspective from Leslie, but I feel like if that's was the case, then this could have a lot more payoff for me, because it is obviously a torment for Wax, but I feel like this is also equally tormentful for Leslie, and I feel like it kind of, I don't know, the way that this is set up, where they're against each other, I don't know, it feels like it kind of cuts off a lot of the potential emotional investment that I have, which seems odd. So anyways, that was the last thing I wanted to talk about. I wanted to know what y'all really thought about that.
Glad you asked. Anything else?
Nothing else for me other than I'm, yet again, as I should firmly expect from a Sanderson novel, in the state of Rafael. I've finished a book, but what has it led to me? More questions and things that obviously I just need to keep reading in order to find out.
Sounds good. Let's reconvene next week. We will be doing both the Alloy of Law and Shadows of Self. Wrap up for next week. Then we have a special itinerary for episode 200 the week after. And then we will be straight into Bands of Mourning to hopefully stay on track for Cosmere Current by December. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Elliot.
See ya.
My dearest, farewell.